An elderly man, convinced his son was taking him to a nursing home, steps out of the car bracing for the worst, only to be utterly speechless at what he sees. What could turn a heartbreaking moment into an unforgettable twist? This emotional story will warm your heart and remind you of the power of family. Mateo Alvarez sat silently by the window of his small room in Austin, Texas, watching the bustling city streets below. At 72 years old, life had slowed down for him, not by choice, but by the weight of time. The once proud, strong man who had built his life with his own two hands now felt like a ghost in someone else's home, a home he shared with his son, Diego, and daughter-in-law, Camila. The room he occupied, filled with the faint scent of his grandson's childhood memories, whispered to him of the life he felt he had stolen. Mateo tightened his grip on the worn photograph of Rosa, his late wife. Her kind eyes seemed to peer back at him, as if reassuring him that he still mattered, though he wasn't sure he believed it. Rosa had been his light, his anchor, his everything. Losing her felt like losing the part of himself that had known how to hope. He sighed deeply, his gaze drifting to the far-off skyline, his heart heavy with guilt. The thought of taking up space, of being an obligation to Diego and Camila, gnawed at him daily. He could see it in the hurried goodbyes before work, in the meals left on trays without shared conversation, in the way the house grew quiet when he entered a room. The love hadn't disappeared, but it had been buried beneath the busyness of life. And Mateo, once a cornerstone of their family, now felt like an afterthought. His mind wandered to San Antonio, where his life had once been vibrant. The little wooden home he and Rosa had built together had been modest but full of warmth. The sound of her laughter, the soft hum of her singing as she worked in their garden, the shared silences that spoke of a bond so deep words were unnecessary. All of it was etched in his heart. Mateo remembered the day he adopted Diego, a boy with wide eyes and an uncertain smile, when he married Rosa. From the first time Diego called him Papa, Mateo had made a silent vow to be the best father he could. Together they had turned that house into a sanctuary where love grew as naturally as the tomatoes in the garden. But life, Mateo thought bitterly, had a cruel way of taking what you cherished most. One fateful night, Mateo had lit a candle when a power outage left his home dark. Exhausted from a long day harvesting potatoes with Palomo, his loyal horse, he fell asleep on the sofa. He awoke to the choking smell of smoke and the terrifying glow of flames. Neighbors had broken down the door, dragging him to safety, but by the time the fire was extinguished, the house was gone. The memories it had held, the photographs of Rosa, the trinkets she had collected, the echoes of a life well lived, were reduced to ash. Mateo had woken in the hospital weeks later, scarred and broken, both physically and emotionally. When Diego brought him to Austin to recover, Mateo left behind not just his home, but a piece of his soul. Life in Diego's home was kind but distant. Camila was polite, Diego was dutiful, but Mateo could sense the strain his presence brought. Teresa, the neighbor who often checked in on him, didn't shy away from voicing her opinions. "They don't know what to do with us when we get old," she had said one afternoon, shaking her head. "We're just a reminder of what they don't want to deal with." Her words haunted Mateo, sinking deep into the cracks of his loneliness. On his birthday, the loneliness reached its peak. Mateo sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at a single slice of cake Teresa had left for him. The candle flickered weakly, as if it too understood the weight of his despair. Diego and Camila had wished him a quick happy birthday that morning before rushing off to work, leaving him to celebrate in silence. That evening, as Diego returned home, Mateo couldn't hold back any longer. He cornered his son in the hallway, his voice trembling with a mix of frustration and resignation. "Take me to a nursing home," Mateo said firmly, his eyes locked on Diego's. "Sell the land in San Antonio, use the money, and let me go. I don't want to be a burden to you or Camila anymore." Diego's face softened, but his shoulders sagged under the weight of the words. "Papa, not now," he replied with a sigh. "We'll talk about it later. It's been a long day." Mateo's frustration boiled over. "If you won't do it, I will. I'll find one myself." But Diego simply patted his father's shoulder and walked away, leaving Mateo standing there, feeling more invisible than ever. Each night after that conversation, Mateo sat at the edge of his bed, whispering apologies to Rosa's photograph. His heart ached with the belief that he had failed her, that he had become the very thing he had sworn never to be, a burden. "Forgive me," he whispered one night, his voice cracking. "I don't belong here anymore." Unbeknownst to him, a plan was already in motion, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his family, his worth, and the love that surrounded him. The morning sun bathed the small Austin house in a soft golden glow as Mateo Alvarez sat quietly in his room, staring at the neatly folded clothes on his bed. His son, Diego, had come to him just moments ago, asking him to pack a few belongings for a trip. Mateo had nodded silently, his heart heavy with unspoken emotions. The request wasn't a surprise, it was what he had asked for after all. Yet now, the finality of it felt like a weight pressing down on his chest. Mateo's hands trembled as he picked up a small suitcase. He methodically packed his few possessions, a couple of neatly pressed shirts, a pair of trousers, and a sweater Rosa had knitted for him years ago. At the very top of the suitcase, he placed the photograph of Rosa, her warm smile frozen in time. He stared at the picture for a long moment, his heart aching with both longing and regret. "Forgive me," he murmured to the photograph, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean for things to end this way." As he zipped up the suitcase, the sound seemed to echo through the room, a final punctuation to the chapter of his life he thought was ending. He took a deep breath and stood, clutching the suitcase tightly as he made his way to the living room. Diego and his wife, Camila, were waiting by the front door. Diego held a car key in his hand, his expression unreadable, while Camila offered a faint smile, her arms crossed as if she didn't quite know what to say. "Are you ready, Papa?" Diego asked, his tone steady but tinged with something Mateo couldn't quite place. Mateo nodded, unable to trust his voice. His grip on the suitcase tightened as he followed Diego out to the car. The air outside was crisp, the morning sky a pale blue. Mateo's footsteps felt heavier with each step he took, as though the ground itself was reluctant to let him go. Camila placed a hand gently on Mateo's shoulder before helping him into the back seat. "You'll be okay, Mateo," she said softly, her voice kind but distant. Mateo offered a small nod, his throat too tight to form words. As the car pulled out of the driveway, he glanced back at the house one last time. The sight blurred through the sheen of tears he refused to let fall. This house, though it had never felt like home, had still been a place where he could hear the echoes of his family's lives, however distant they seemed. The hum of the engine filled the silence as they drove out of Austin. Diego kept his eyes on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Camila stared out the passenger window, a faint, enigmatic smile playing on her lips. Mateo sat in the back, clutching the suitcase as if it were a lifeline. The cityscape soon gave way to rolling hills and open fields. Mateo's gaze drifted to the passing scenery, and memories came flooding back unbidden. He could see Rosa's laughter in the vibrant wildflowers dotting the countryside, her spirit in the golden sunlight streaming through the trees. He thought of the drives they used to take together, imagining their future and growing old side by side. He let out a shaky sigh, his chest tightening with the weight of the past. He thought of Diego as a boy, tumbling into his arms with giggles that could melt the hardest heart. He remembered the sound of Rosa humming while planting flowers in their garden, her hands covered in rich, dark soil. They had built a life together, and it had all seemed so permanent. But permanence, Mateo thought bitterly, was an illusion. "Are you okay back there, Papa?" Diego asked, glancing at him through the rearview mirror. His voice was casual, but there was an undercurrent of concern. Mateo quickly dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. "Sí, mijo," he replied, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "Just tired." Camila turned in her seat and offered him a reassuring smile. "We're almost there. You'll feel better soon." Mateo nodded, though her words rang hollow. Almost there. The phrase echoed in his mind, tinged with both relief and sorrow. What would there look like? Would it be the sterile hallways of a nursing home where strangers would care for him as his family moved on with their lives? Or worse, would it be a place far away, out of sight and out of mind? The road began to narrow, winding through dense trees that formed a canopy overhead. Mateo's anxiety grew with each passing mile. The landmarks became unfamiliar, the world outside the window a blur of green and sunlight. He tightened his grip on the suitcase, his knuckles white. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice breaking slightly. Diego didn't look back. "You'll see, Papa," he replied cryptically, a faint smile on his lips. The uncertainty gnawed at Mateo, his thoughts racing. He had expected to be dropped off at a facility near the city, somewhere convenient for his family to visit occasionally. But this remote road, surrounded by nothing but trees and sky, felt ominous, like a journey to a place where he might truly be forgotten. Finally the car slowed, the tires crunching over gravel. Mateo's breath caught as they pulled into a clearing, the sunlight streaming through the trees casting long shadows on the ground. Diego turned off the engine and turned to face Mateo, his expression unreadable. "We're here, Papa." Mateo hesitated, his heart pounding as Diego opened the car door and extended a hand to help him out. His legs felt like lead as he stepped onto the gravel, his eyes darting around nervously. Camilla retrieved his suitcase from the trunk, her movements calm and deliberate. As Mateo adjusted his glasses, the world around him came into focus, and what he saw stole the breath from his lungs. Before him stood a house, his house. But it wasn't the charred remains he had left behind. It was whole, gleaming in the sunlight as if the fire had never touched it. The white paint shimmered, the porch railings were sturdy and new, and the windows sparkled with a clarity that seemed almost surreal. Mateo's knees buckled, and Diego quickly caught him, steadying him with gentle hands. What is this?" Mateo stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Diego smiled, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Welcome home, Papa." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, as Mateo stood frozen in disbelief. The gravel crunched beneath Mateo's worn shoes as Diego guided him toward the house. Mateo's mind raced, his heart pounding so loudly he thought Diego must surely hear it. This wasn't what he had expected. This wasn't what he had braced himself for. His thoughts tangled, emotions flooding in waves of disbelief, confusion, and the faintest glimmer of hope. The house stood before him not as a memory or a ghost, but as a living, tangible thing. The white facade gleamed under the sunlight, the fresh paint catching the light in a way that made it seem alive. The porch railings were newly built, the wood smooth and strong. Flower boxes adorned the windows, vibrant blooms spilling over the edges like laughter. Mateo's legs felt unsteady, and he gripped Diego's arm tightly for support. "Papa, are you okay?" Diego's voice was soft, full of concern. Mateo nodded weakly, his throat too tight to speak. His eyes darted across the familiar features, the wooden beams, the broad front steps, the window where Rosa used to sit and sew, the garden plot that once held rows of tomatoes and sunflowers. It was all there, every piece of it brought back to life. This can't be real," Mateo finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Diego smiled, a mixture of pride and emotion shining in his eyes. "It's real, Papa. Come and see." Mateo took a tentative step forward, then another, until he was standing at the base of the porch steps. His fingers brushed the railing, the wood warm and solid beneath his touch. He climbed the steps slowly, each one feeling like a journey back through time. His breath hitched as Diego opened the front door, revealing the interior. The smell of fresh pine and varnish filled the air, mingling with something even more potent, the unmistakable scent of home. Mateo's eyes widened as he stepped inside. The layout was the same as he remembered, but everything was new, polished and pristine. The floors shone with a rich glow, the walls were painted in warm, inviting tones, and the furniture was arranged just as it had been before the fire. His gaze fell on the fireplace and his breath caught. Above the mantel was a photograph of him and Rosa on their wedding day, their smiles radiant and full of love. The frame gleamed as if it, too, had been given new life. "Rosa," Mateo whispered, his hand reaching out to touch the photograph. His fingers trembled as they brushed the glass, a tear slipping down his cheek. Diego stepped up beside him, his voice gentle. We tried to make everything as close to how it was as we could. We saved what we could from the fire, and the rest we rebuilt. Mateo turned to face him, his eyes wide with disbelief. You did this? All of this? Diego nodded. It was a family effort, Papa. Camila, the neighbors, everyone wanted to help. This house meant so much to you and to all of us. We couldn't let it stay gone. Mateo's knees buckled again, and Diego quickly guided him to his old armchair, which now sat reupholstered and restored in its rightful place by the window. Mateo sank into the chair, his hands gripping the armrests as if to anchor himself in the reality of what he was seeing. It's like Rosa never left, Mateo said softly, his voice choked with emotion. He looked around, his gaze falling on the small keepsakes carefully arranged on the shelves, an old brass key, a carved wooden bird Rosa had once gifted him, and a clock that had ticked through decades of their lives together. Camila appeared in the doorway carrying his suitcase. She set it down gently and approached Mateo with a warm smile. Welcome home, Mateo, she said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. Mateo sat in stunned silence, his mind struggling to grasp the magnitude of what had been done for him. This wasn't just a house. It was a resurrection of everything he had thought was lost forever. It was Rosa's laughter, Diego's childhood, and the dreams they had once shared, all brought back to life through love and dedication. Why? Mateo asked finally, his voice breaking. Why would you do all of this for me? Diego knelt beside him, his hand resting on Mateo's knee. Because you're our family, Papa. You raised me, loved me, and gave me a life I wouldn't have had without you. This house is just a small way of showing you how much we love you. Mateo's breath hitched, his chest tightening with emotion. He reached out and pulled Diego into a tight embrace, his hands gripping his son's shoulders as if to hold on to the moment forever. I thought I was a burden, Mateo whispered, tears streaming down his face. I thought I was unwanted. Diego pulled back just enough to look him in the eye. You were never a burden, Papa. You're the heart of this family. And this house, it's as much yours as it is ours. Mateo sat back in his chair, his body still trembling with emotion. He glanced around the room again, taking in every detail. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace settle over him, as warm and comforting as Rosa's embrace. Thank you, Mateo said finally, his voice thick with gratitude. Thank you for giving me back what I thought I had lost forever. Diego smiled, his own eyes glistening. Welcome home, Papa. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light across the house, Mateo felt something he hadn't felt in years, a deep, unshakable sense of belonging. For the first time since the fire, he felt whole. The soft glow of late afternoon sunlight filtered through the windows, casting warm hues across the living room. Mateo sat in his armchair, his weathered hands brushing the polished wood of the armrests. The surreal beauty of his restored home left him in awe, but questions swirled in his mind, a mix of curiosity and disbelief. Diego knelt in front of him, his face open and sincere. Camila joined him, sitting on the edge of the coffee table, her hand resting gently on Mateo's knee. Papa, Diego began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. It's time you knew the whole story. Mateo sat up straighter, his eyes narrowing as he studied his son's expression. What story? What is all this? Diego took a deep breath, his gaze never leaving his father's. When your house burned down, it wasn't just the home you lost. We saw how much it took from you, how it broke your spirit. You gave so much to us, to our family, and to Mama's memory. We couldn't let it end like that. Mateo's hands gripped the armrests as Diego continued, his voice steady and filled with conviction. I knew rebuilding your house would give you back more than just a place to live. It would give you back a piece of yourself. So we started planning. Camila and I worked late nights, weekends, and saved every penny we could. Camilla chimed in, her voice soft but firm. The neighbors pitched in too. They remembered you, Mateo. They remembered Rosa. Everyone wanted to help. Diego reached into a small drawer by the mantel and pulled out an envelope. He handed it to Mateo, whose fingers trembled as he took it. "Do you remember these papers you signed a few months ago?" Diego asked. Mateo frowned, his mind struggling to recall. "You said it was for selling the land. I didn't want to sign them, but I thought it would help you." Diego's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "You didn't sell the land, Papa. Those weren't sale documents. They were construction permits. We needed your signature to rebuild the house." Mateo's mouth fell open slightly, his eyes darting between Diego and Camilla. "Construction permits?" he repeated, his voice shaky. Camilla nodded. "Every nail, every beam, every plank, it was all done with your blessing, even if you didn't know it at the time." Diego reached behind him and pulled out a leather-bound journal, its edges slightly worn but lovingly preserved. He placed it in Mateo's hands with care. "And there's more. We found this when we were going through what survived the fire." Mateo's breath caught in his throat as he opened the journal. Rosa's familiar handwriting filled the pages, each word like a whisper from the past. Tears welled in his eyes as he read the entries, her thoughts and dreams spilling out before him. "She kept this for years," Diego said, his voice thick with emotion. "She wrote about her love for you, for our family, for this house. She wanted it to always be a place of warmth and love." Mateo's vision blurred as he traced his fingers over the ink, Rosa's words wrapping around him like a warm embrace. "I thought I lost her," he murmured, his voice cracking. "But she's still here. She never left." Diego rested a hand on Mateo's shoulder. "That's why we did this, Papa. To give you back everything you thought was gone, to show you that you're not a burden. You're the heart of this family." Mateo clutched the journal to his chest, his shoulders shaking as tears streamed down his face. He looked up at Diego and Camilla, his voice trembling with gratitude. "I don't deserve this. I don't deserve all you've done." Camilla leaned in, her eyes soft with kindness. "Papa, you've always deserved this. You've given us so much. This is just our way of giving back." Diego smiled gently. "We're not just rebuilding a house, we're rebuilding everything it stands for: family, love, and memories." Mateo sat in silence for a long moment, his hands resting on the journal. His heart swelled with emotions he couldn't fully put into words. The weight of loneliness and guilt that had burdened him for so long began to lift, replaced by a warmth that spread through his entire being. Finally, he reached out, pulling both Diego and Camilla into a tight embrace. His voice, though choked with tears, carried a newfound strength. "Thank you. Thank you for showing me I'm not alone, for bringing me back home." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, its golden light spilling across the living room, Mateo felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. This house wasn't just bricks and wood. It was love, dedication, and the enduring bond of family. It was home, and it was his. Mateo stepped onto the porch, his senses heightened by the fresh country air. The warm afternoon sun cast long shadows over the yard, and he felt the sturdy wood beneath his feet, a tangible reminder that his home was not just a dream, but a reality. Diego and Camilla stood behind him, their smiles soft yet filled with anticipation. "Come with me, Papa," Diego said, gesturing toward the yard. Mateo hesitated for a moment before following his son. Each step felt heavy, not with fear, but with the weight of memories and unspoken gratitude. As they descended the porch stairs, Diego led him to a small corral near the garden. Mateo's breath caught as a familiar sound reached his ears, a soft whinny that resonated deep in his chest. There, standing tall and proud, was Palomo, Mateo's beloved horse. His coat gleamed in the sunlight, his mane brushed and flowing gently in the breeze. Palomo stomped the ground once, lifting his head as his large, intelligent eyes met Mateo's. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Mateo's lips parted, but no words came. Tears welled in his eyes, and his chest heaved with the effort to contain his emotions. "Palomo," he finally whispered, his voice trembling. The old stallion let out another whinny, as if answering his master's call. Mateo took a hesitant step forward, then another, his legs shaky but determined. When he reached Palomo, he raised a trembling hand to the horse's mane, his fingers brushing the soft strands. "You're alive," Mateo murmured, his voice choked with disbelief and joy. "I thought I lost you forever." Palomo nuzzled Mateo's shoulder gently, a familiar gesture that broke through the floodgates of Mateo's emotions. He wrapped his arms around the horse's neck, burying his face in the silky mane as tears streamed freely down his cheeks. His voice cracked as he spoke, the words pouring out like a prayer. "I'm so sorry. I thought I failed you too." Diego and Camila watched silently from the fence, their hearts full as they witnessed the emotional reunion. Camila leaned against Diego, her hand gripping his arm. "I've never seen him this happy," she whispered. Diego nodded, his throat tight with emotion. Palomo was more than just a horse to him. He was family. This is what Papa needed. Mateo pulled back slightly, his hand stroking Palomo's mane as he spoke to the horse like an old friend. "We've been through so much, haven't we? The long days in the fields, the nights under the stars. I thought I lost it all. But here you are." Diego stepped forward, his voice gentle. "The neighbors found him a few weeks after the fire, wandering near the edge of town. They kept him safe until we could bring him back here." Mateo turned to face his son, his eyes glistening. "You even brought him back," he said, his voice breaking. "You thought of everything." Diego placed a hand on Mateo's shoulder. "We knew how much he meant to you, Papa. Palomo is part of this family, just like you are." As the weight of the moment settled over him, Mateo felt a shift deep within. The despair that had once consumed him was lifting, replaced by a sense of peace and renewal. Palomo's presence was a reminder of the life Mateo had built with Rosa, a life filled with love, hard work, and unwavering dedication. "Thank you," Mateo said, his voice filled with sincerity. "For Palomo, for the house, for everything. I don't have enough words to tell you what this means to me." Diego smiled, his own eyes damp with unshed tears. "You don't have to, Papa. We just wanted to give you back what you thought you'd lost." Camila joined them, slipping an arm around Mateo's waist. "You've always been the heart of this family. We wanted to show you that." Mateo looked back at Palomo, his fingers brushing the horse's coat one last time before stepping back. "We're home, Palomo," he said softly, "and it feels better than I ever imagined." As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, Mateo stood between Diego and Camila, the three of them gazing out over the yard. Palomo grazed peacefully nearby, his movements steady and calm. Mateo felt the cool breeze on his face, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers and fresh earth. For the first time in years, he felt whole. This wasn't just a homecoming, it was a renewal. Surrounded by his family, Mateo realized that the love and support he'd felt from Diego and Camila wasn't just an act of kindness, it was a testament to the strength of their bond and a reminder that even in the face of loss, love had the power to rebuild. As the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Mateo turned to Diego and Camila, his heart brimming with gratitude. "I thought I'd lost everything," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "But you've given me more than I ever thought possible. You've given me my life back." Diego placed an arm around his father's shoulders, pulling him close. "You never lost it, Papa. It was always here. We just helped you find it again." Mateo woke early the next morning, the light of dawn filtering softly through the lace curtains of his rebuilt bedroom. For the first time in years, he felt truly rested. The familiar creak of the wooden floor beneath his feet as he swung his legs over the edge of the bed was a comforting sound. He glanced around the room, his eyes settling on the framed photo of Rosa on the nightstand. Her warm smile seemed to radiate encouragement, as if she too felt the peace he had found. Stepping outside, Mateo inhaled deeply. savoring the crisp morning air tinged with the earthy scent of dew-covered grass. Palomo was grazing near the edge of the garden, his mane catching the golden rays of the rising sun. Mateo's heart swelled with gratitude as he approached the horse, reaching out to stroke his neck. "Good morning, old friend," Mateo said softly. "It looks like we have work to do." The garden, once a source of pride and sustenance for Mateo and Rosa, had been carefully tilled and prepared by Diego and Camila. Tools were neatly arranged on the edge of the plot, and a variety of young plants awaited Mateo's care. As he crouched to plant the first seedling, a deep sense of purpose filled him. Each handful of soil, each pat to secure a seedling, felt like a step toward reclaiming the life he had thought was lost. The hours passed in peaceful rhythm, the simple joys of planting and tending the garden bringing a smile to Mateo's face. When Diego and Camila arrived later in the morning, they found him standing in the garden, his hands caked with soil, but his expression serene. "You've been busy, Papa," Diego said, stepping beside him. Mateo nodded, wiping his hands on his jeans. "I've missed this, feeling the earth, watching something grow. It reminds me of all the good things Rosa and I built together." Camila handed him a glass of water. "And now you're building again for all of us." After lunch, Mateo unpacked the last of his belongings. Each item he pulled from the box carried a story, a memory tied to the life he and Rosa had shared. He placed a small carved bird on the mantel, a gift Rosa had given him on their first anniversary. A brass key once used for the original house found a new place on the kitchen counter. With each object, Mateo felt the weight of his sorrow lift, replaced by the warmth of remembrance. Near the bottom of the box, Mateo found an envelope he had almost forgotten. It was the letter he had written weeks earlier, when he was at his loneliest. In it, he had apologized to Diego, calling himself a burden and asking for forgiveness. Mateo's hands trembled as he read the words, a bittersweet smile tugging at his lips. With deliberate care, he tore the letter into small pieces, letting them fall into the wastebasket. "No more doubts," he whispered to himself. "I see now. I've always been loved." That evening, the house came alive with the sounds of family. Diego and Camila had brought dinner, a simple yet delicious feast they enjoyed at the long wooden table. They laughed as they reminisced about Diego's childhood, sharing stories that brought both joy and tears. "Do you remember the time I tried to build a treehouse and it fell apart?" Diego asked, grinning. Mateo chuckled, shaking his head. "How could I forget? You were so determined, but you didn't measure anything. Rosa and I spent hours fixing it." Camila joined in the laughter. "It's no wonder he's so handy now. You trained him well, Papa." The warmth of their conversation filled the house, echoing through the halls like music. Mateo sat back in his chair, his heart swelling with contentment. The house no longer felt like a place of loss. It was once again a sanctuary of love and belonging. Later that night, after Diego and Camila had left, Mateo sat on the porch with Palomo grazing nearby. The stars were bright above, twinkling against the velvety black sky. Mateo held Rosa's journal in his lap, its worn leather cover soft under his fingers. He flipped through the pages, reading her words of love and hope. She had written about her dreams for their family, her desire to see Mateo and Diego happy. Mateo's chest tightened as he read one passage aloud. "This house will always be our home, a place where love grows, no matter what storms we face." Tears welled in his eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude, not sorrow. He looked out over the yard, the freshly planted garden, and Palomo's strong silhouette against the night. Rosa's dream was alive again, and so was he. "I see it now, Rosa," Mateo said softly, his voice carrying into the quiet night. "You were right. This house is still our home." As he closed the journal and leaned back in his chair, a sense of peace washed over him. Mateo wasn't just rebuilding his life, he was rediscovering its meaning, one loving moment at a time. The sun rose on another crisp morning, painting the rebuilt home in soft hues of gold. Mateo Alvarez stood on the porch, his hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. The rich aroma reminded him of mornings with Rosa, when life was simpler but full of love. Now, the house that had once felt like a lost dream was a vibrant reality, filled with the laughter and warmth of family. Diego and Camilla arrived as they often did on weekends, their voices ringing out cheerfully as they stepped onto the porch. Camilla carried a basket filled with pastries while Diego held a bundle of fresh herbs they had picked together. Mateo welcomed them with open arms, his face lighting up with joy. "Buenos dias, Papa," Diego said, embracing his father. "How's the garden coming along?" Mateo chuckled. "It's thriving, thanks to the help of Palomo. He keeps watch better than any scarecrow." As they sat down for breakfast, the conversation turned to fond memories. Diego shared stories of his childhood, the lessons Mateo had taught him, and the strength he had drawn from his father's resilience. "You've always been my hero, Papa," Diego said, his voice filled with emotion. "I wouldn't be the man I am today without you." Mateo looked at his son, his eyes glistening. "And I wouldn't be the man I am without you, mijo. You've shown me what it means to be truly loved." Later that day, Mateo walked through his garden, showing Diego and Camilla the progress he'd made. Rows of vibrant vegetables and blooming flowers stretched out before them, a testament to his hard work and renewed purpose. As he pointed out each plant, his voice carried a mixture of pride and gratitude. "This garden isn't just for me," Mateo said. "It's for all of us. A reminder that no matter what we lose, we can always rebuild with love and care." Camilla knelt beside a patch of flowers, her fingers brushing over the delicate petals. "You've turned this place into something beautiful, Papa. It's a home, not just a house." Mateo nodded, his heart swelling. "And it will always be a home as long as we're together." As the day stretched into evening, the family gathered on the porch to watch the sun set. The sky was a masterpiece of orange, pink, and purple, the colors blending seamlessly into one another. Mateo sat between Diego and Camilla, his hand resting on his son's shoulder. "Thank you," Mateo said softly, "for everything. I thought I had lost it all, but you've given me back more than I ever imagined." Diego turned to his father, his expression filled with warmth. "You've given us so much, Papa. This was the least we could do." As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, Mateo felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The house, the garden, the love of his family, all of it reminded him that he wasn't a burden. He was the foundation, the heart of a family that cherished him. "This home isn't just bricks and wood," Mateo said, his voice carrying in the stillness of the night. "It's built on love, the kind that lasts through every trial and every storm. That's what I've learned from you two." Diego and Camilla exchanged a glance, their smiles reflecting the pride and love they felt for Mateo. The three of them sat in silence for a moment, savoring the stillness, the warmth of the bond they shared. Mateo stood leaning on the porch railing as he looked out over his land. Palomo grazed peacefully in the moonlight, and the house behind him glowed with a welcoming light. "This story," Mateo said, turning back to Diego and Camilla, "isn't just about a house. It's about family. It's about never giving up on the people you love, even when times are hard." His words hung in the air, carrying a universal truth. Mateo hoped others would hear his story and find the strength to cherish their families, to rebuild when life seemed broken. As he looked out at the stars, a sense of fulfillment washed over him. Life had been hard, but it had also been beautiful. And now, surrounded by love and hope, Mateo knew the best chapters were yet to come. What do you think of Mateo's journey? Have you ever done something special to honor your family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartwarming stories like this, because love and understanding can create miracles